The universe is loud in a very quiet way. Are you listening? Welcome to the Cosmic Whispers podcast, where we delve into the realms of spirituality, personal growth, and the cosmic dance between the third and fifth dimensions. In a world filled with noise and distractions, we invite you to tune in to your own cosmic whispers, where we can awaken our inner wisdom and embark on unveiling the authentic self and cosmic connection. Welcome to episode 9, part 2 with special guest LIHLA. LIHLA is a cellist, singer, composer, electronic producer, and storyteller who masterfully blends cello, electronic music production, and vocals to craft immersive, oral, hallucinatory worlds of intricately shifting landscapes. She has over 30 years of classical training and a decade of composing and producing experiences, effortlessly navigating between modern classical, electronica, and sonic environments. Her current work explores diaspora of time and space, why we all feel so displaced. She uses storytelling and voice as a link to collective and ancestral memory. LIHLA has been exploring acoustic landscapes that depict the journeys of the internal psyche and induce altered states of consciousness. She is interested in how forming abstract narratives create shared experiences of consciousness and safe spaces for travel.
Coming back to music, I think that was one of the places when I did find this moment of collaboration when, actually improvisation was one of my biggest ways into this feeling. I was trained as a classical musician, which comes with a whole lot of hang-ups and a whole lot of perfection. Perfectionism is one of those things that you strive for in classical music. And improvisation is the exact opposite of it. It's giving into a moment where you have no idea what's going to happen. Very scary, but incredible. It's the most wonderful feeling. And it's like this little microcosm, right, for the world. And then when you do that with other people, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 20, whatever people giving into this moment at the same time, just jumping in the river. It's the most incredible feeling. It's the closest I could get to in this world that reflected what my spirit felt, but couldn't get in this 3D world. I mean, that's why music has it had to be there. I couldn't choose anything else because there was no truth in anything else. And the interesting thing is when I started to learn to be in other dimensions and to follow threads of energy and consciousness that were in I don't even know how to describe it. When I do share with people these experiences, the closest thing I can actually link it to is music, because music is an abstract resonance, but we can all follow it. And we don't put it into words. We don't put it into thought. It's like this abstract story, consciousness, whatever it is, that is manifest in physical world through vibration.
And it can be received in the way that you want.
Exactly. And it actually goes through your body. It goes through your physical body directly to everything that's in between it, within it, without it, and it's one of the only things I found in this world, and we all share it. There's an incredible book called Inner Sound, and it talks about, pedaling back to what we were talking about before on spiritual awakenings, when I listened to the message that was in front of me talking about, what my place was in this world, I was like, so how do I do this? And so my academic brain went to reading. And I found this book, and it talks about how music and dance, it is a human-created expression. And they were initially intended for altering states of consciousness.
Chanting, dancing.
Exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Pilgrimage, days of ritual, of, connecting to a higher consciousness, but in a collective way. I think organized religion has pushed apart the collective nature of things. So kind of in many ways, when we are seeking an alternate spiritual path, we go within and we go alone because we need to find our own way. And I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I didn't trust what was already there. So I felt like it's something that I needed to find my own way. And I found even in, like in groups that had good intentions, at some point when there was too many involved, it kind of got twisted, it got warped, and it lost its message. But then after some period, I realized it has to be collective. It has to be with other people. I need to find, otherwise I'm going to end up rolling around in my own bubble for the rest of my life, which is all fine. Huge world in there. But then why am I here? There's this phrase that keeps coming back. It's actually the first song in my album is called Becoming Human. And somebody said to me, what is it? What were we before human? And I said, everything. But being human is the most difficult thing. It's the most baffling task here. I still don't quite understand it. It still seems monumental, but I'm trying.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lifetime trying to figure this human thing out. Why so much conflict and why so much sorting and delayering and
Yes.
releasing.
Yes. Did we do this? Did we make it this complicated?
Yeah, we did. There's this one book. Is it Starhawk? I forgot the name of the title, but it's the book on the history of the goddess religion, which was before Buddhism, before Christianity, before all the major religions. And we lived like this. It was about the divine feminine and how women, I wouldn't say they were ruling, but we were all equal. And so we had naturally women supporting women, naturally men and women working together in harmony, naturally chanting, dancing, reaching altered states of consciousness with or without psychedelics. That was all normal. And this was thousands of years ago. And then the patriarchy took over via the route of religion. And that's when the witch burning started. Witches, by definition, are healers. So women that were into herbs and healing. And they're like, oh, well, that's just some like voodoo magic. Let's just burn them.
It's ungodly. It's unclean. Like, I mean, we even got taught that our bodies were unclean. The natural cycle of creation, fertility was shamed,
Yeah, menstruation back then was celebrated. And so during the week of menstruation, women would rest and honor their wombs.
And give back to the earth through their bodies.
Yes. And now it's shameful. Like, oh, why are you talking about your period? Oh, you have to work throughout. And I was like, no, we got to honor our bodies.
Absolutely. And it is one of those things where it's now like, I mean, I have been baffled that in the year 2023, there are men who don't understand what happens when a woman menstruates. It's like this just like baffles me. It's like, oh, but you can't go swimming, you have your period. It's like, okay, you don't even understand how any of this works, really. It's like, so you actually don't even understand how you came into being.
Yeah.
Or also like with childbirth, like I was like, I'm not giving birth in a hospital. I'm not having some man who doesn't have a womb cut off all my feeling from my waist down and then tell me when to do something that my body can do if I was in a coma. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be present for the thing that I was biologically made to do, And I was really lucky, actually. I ended up being in Montreal where I had my midwives who were witches.
Oh, wow.
And they sat there. It was wonderful.
That's amazing.
It was really, really incredible. And even before that, like sexuality, like female sexuality. And like I was raised in a culture that was like, don't do that or people will think you're a prostitute or you have to cross your legs. You can't show your legs. You can't, it's not fair if you wear a top that's low. It's not fair to the men.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The list goes on and on.
I think a lot of Western cultures also sexualize the human body when this is just natural. Like if we stop sexualizing it so much.
And respecting it, and seeing that it's just a beautiful thing that is the foundation of biological life for humans.
And we all have them. I mean, it's nothing new.
Exactly.
Breaking news.
Exactly. We have bodies.
Yeah, exactly. We were born naked.
Exactly. I remember somebody saying to me actually a long time ago, it was an ex-boyfriend of mine actually, and he said, I feel like your sensuality and sexuality is somehow connected to your music. And I'd never really thought about it because I wasn't connected to my sexuality for a very long time. And I guess it found its way through that honest communication of feeling the sensuality of being a feminine being. And I guess I'd been so brainwashed into thinking, sexuality is this like
it's bad.
bad, or it's like there is like a stylized sexuality that is accepted. Like being able to dance in a certain way or wearing certain things. It's like this is feminine, and I never identified with any of those. I've never been a high heels girl. I've never been I don't know how to contour my face. I don't know how to straighten my hair. All those things. I have never had a manicure. It's funny because when I look back, my biggest role models for femininity were Morticia Adams. She was a huge role model for me because I thought this woman is just owning life.
She's a powerful witch.
She's a powerful witch. She has absolutely, and Gomez adores her, and she's the matriarch of the house. She does it with such grace, elegance, and power. And I was like, that's the kind of woman I want to be, I remember the first time I saw Björk, I thought, this woman is incredible. She's
an alien.
She's an alien.
She is straight up alien.
Absolutely. But
I love
she's
it.
sensual as well. And she, she is also in her earth body as well, but connected to all other networks, and I just thought, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
Those are great role models. Really?
Totally.
You chose the powerful women.
The powerful women, exactly.
I would actually like to know your experience as a psychonaut, and when did that start, and what inspired you to go that route?
I think I was always a natural tripper.
It really just seems like you were born on the other side of the veil, so you're already tapping into altered states of consciousness in that way.
I absolutely was. As a child, my two wonderful escapes I would have. One was, so we had this insane wallpaper with like flowers, and it was like super kitsch.
I understand. Oh yeah, we had all the
wallpapers.
And then,
Chinese household in the 80s. So you could totally imagine it was all over the place. And I would lie for hours and I would stare at this wallpaper and just go into worlds in this wallpaper. So looking back, that's kind of my first experience as a psychonaut. It was already written. It was imprinted in there. It's totally natural. And then at nighttime, of course, there was that thing of the world opening up when everything went quiet. It was like everything shut off to be able to give space to things that were unseen. And then, of course, as a teenager, I rebelled hard and did everything I was not supposed to do. Don't do drugs, don't listen to this music, don't do this, don't have boys. And of course, if you tell somebody who's had a really sheltered upbringing that's exactly what they're going to do. And what I learned was there are stupid mistakes. Yes, of course, done plenty of those. But I think one of the things that psychedelics has taught me in particular, it's definitely made me a better person. It's definitely opened up a lot of my consciousness. It's definitely activated a lot of my powers, I would say, or my access to other realms, definitely. But the biggest thing is surrender.
100%.
Psychedelics takes away your power to control anything, right? And somehow that act of surrender is the opening of portals. I do believe it is accessible through meditation, through anything you choose to do. It's the kind of the intention. I think the thing with psychedelics is it does open them more easily so that you can access them later.
It's like the speed dial.
It's the speed dial
exactly. For other dimensions.
Okay, and we don't have enough time right now. So I'm actually really grateful for that, for going through that fast lane, to be honest. I often speak with people who are afraid. They're like, I'm really afraid that I'm going to lose my mind. I'm like, losing your mind is the best thing because the mind that you're given is rubbish.
Yeah.
They were like, but what if you forget who you are? And I'm like, once again, best thing I ever did was to lose all context of who I thought I was.
Breaking the narrative of what society or your parents or your family or whoever is telling you who you should be.
You're breaking the narrative. Exactly. And it gives you a clean slate. It allows you to exist in a context that doesn't involve all those things, doesn't involve a name or a gender or any of those things, any of those stories. And it's the most humbling experience that I'm very, very grateful for. And I feel like there is kind of this hidden code when you meet other people that we feel in each other. It's like, oh yeah, you've been awakened or you have had these experiences. I don't know which came first. Was it a fearlessness that I was born with, or I was given, or I was learned, or I mean, I've never been completely fearless, that's for sure. But I've always been resentful of being held back by being afraid of something. One of those things that also comes through, for example, like the discipline of a practice when it's done with good intentions. This is another kind of, it's like every step that you take to, for example, honing your craft or learning a new skill, it's like these are all gifts that you give to yourself to say that I can trust this. We can trust this. This is my contract. This is my statement of intention every time I do this, to doing this, with a meditative practice or, getting fit, whatever it is, And it's that thing we were talking about before. It's like just showing up. The difficult thing is there's just so many things to learn and so many things to do. I have difficulty with organizing and prioritizing, like classic ADHD. And I do get very heavily fixated and focused on one particular thing. But, that's just kind of how I operate.
I also wonder, is it really ADHD, or is it just because we're so curious and we know that there's so much to learn, and because time is a human thing?
Well, that's it. Maybe we just don't buy that package. All these things that I'm seeing to have trouble with are things that were invented by human beings. So maybe just don't like your system. It's simple as that. I just choose not to use this system unless I have to, or I do it enough that I get left alone, basically. That's pretty much it. I pay my taxes in Germany, which is one of the most unbelievable, mind-boggling bureaucratic systems in the world. I do it, so I get left alone.
How long have you been in Germany for?
It's coming up to 8 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's quite a long time.
And what brought you there?
Breakup and...
Oh.
A breakup, and well, basically, I didn't really
spiritual awakening.
I literally didn't know where to go, and then I was given a contract in Berlin, and I thought, well, I know some people there, and it's a good place to be an artist because
for sure, especially for music.
Exactly, and it's like the standard of living is not so high that you have to hustle so hard.
I find that in Europe generally.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was free childcare. I was thinking of London. I was definitely not going back to Australia. But then it's like, you pay for childcare, and I was like, I can't afford to go back to work. So I was like, where is the safest place for me to start a new life as a single parent and continue? I never had any intentions of taking a real job.
A real job?
Or of growing up.
So funny that you call it a real job now. If you think about the narrative, a real job of what society would say.
I had no intention of giving up my real job. You're so right.
I think technically my parents feel like I don't have a real job. Whatever. I don't care anymore. And it's funny because, we're following our passions, which is the core of who we are as spiritual beings, is to follow your creativity in any way that it manifests. And I'm thinking culturally in France, if you kind of jump around industries, you're seen as unorganized, not knowing what you want,
unreliable,
unstable.
Yes.
I really feel like I've had several lives. Like I've been in different industries. So if you look at what I've done, like if I were to make a resume, which hopefully I never have to.
This is the best position to be in.
It would be like jumping around like, oh, wow, this girl's like unstable. I'm like, no, I just follow my passions. And if my passions change or if I get burnt out, I'm not going to keep doing something that I used to love that it turns into something that I hate.
Well, absolutely, because then you just end up being bitter and resentful. And who wants to work with that in the end? I was like thinking a little bit about what you were just saying and also like what our parents think. And at some point I thought, does this opinion matter if I don't even agree with it in the end? Because it's natural that we have this inbuilt thing to need the approval to prove ourselves that I'm not a complete fuck up. I didn't fail everything, contrary to popular belief, actually doing really well. But at some point I thought, whose measuring stick is this? And it's not even a measuring stick I have in my cupboard.
Right.
So why does it matter? For example, like in the dating world, why does the opinion of a man that I would never have a relationship matter? Because it's not even the same language at the same time. So if I would need a resume, then that's not my industry. I've never been asked for a resume.
Good for you.
No one's even asked for my degree. And the thing is that in the music industry, somebody says, do you know somebody who could do this? And they go, oh yeah, just give Lee a call. That's it. It comes with the assumption that you can do what you do. You don't have to prove anything because the proof has been in existing and doing it. Mm-hmm. This thing of, why wouldn't you want well-rounded people? You know, I studied contemporary writing and literature and poetry as a science. You know, I did it all through high school and then in university as with my Bachelor of Music and Arts. And I didn't ever do it with the intention of like becoming, an academic. But now I do know why I do it, because that's why I storytell. That's why people are like, oh, you know, how can you write? And it's like, well, I just always have. I've always been interested in words. I've always been interested in poetry. But I'm not going to tell you that I got a degree in, you know, English studies, or it's not important. None of this is important in the end. For example, when we connected, it was not even like, I didn't Google you and say, you know, who is this lady and what has she done and what are her credentials? It's like, no, you know, I feel what you do, I see what you do, and that is your resume for me.
And it's the energetic resonance. When I started this podcast, I did do some research on the analytical parts of like, oh, this is the most efficient way to do it, blah, 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 right? But at the same time, I'm wanting to do this podcast 98% based on intuition. There is a part where I have to do some planning.
Of course.
It really is about energetic resonance. I'm like, okay, how am I going to find all these guests? Mm-hmm. The professional podcasters are saying you have to have everything lined up and do 3 months ahead of time. And I'm like, you know what? Sure, that makes sense. But at the same time, I'm going to find guests by the way we connect energetically. And it's been like that this entire time. And I need to let go of that analytical brain and just go with the flow.
Trust.
Yeah.
Just trust.
Trust and receive.
Absolutely.
And the more I trust and receive, the more I connect with people and they come into my life. And every conversation has been beyond amazing because of that. And I just learned so much.
Because you asked. You did. I said this to my partner last night. He said, I don't understand how I've been so lucky to be at this point. I was like, no. Do not disrespect everything that you've done to get to this point. It's not luck. You listened, you reflected, you asked, you manifested, all of these things. Mm-hmm. It's not just falling in your lap. Cast this spell a long time ago.
Oh, I like that. I cast this spell.
And, you know, now it's like the fruits are falling and you get to enjoy that and you get to trust that. Now I'm not surprised when these things happen, because at some point I was just like, yeah, if I call, there will be an answer. Mm-hmm. It just will happen, you know. So I went through a period of about a year and a half where I was like, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to completely trust. I'm going to say yes to everything. It took me to some incredible places. I started playing bands, meeting people, traveling, and I mean, within reason, because I still have a child. If there is the time, I'll do it. And if there is the resources, I'll do it. And I met incredible people to the point where I was saying to somebody, I was like, oh, you know, I would like to do a performance in this place. And, you know, they said, well, how's that going to happen? And I said, well, I kind of just believe that once I put the intention out, somebody sitting next to me will say, oh, I know somebody who works there. And then the person sitting next to me said, are you guys talking about the planetarium? I know somebody who works there. And I was like, there you go. And on the other hand, during this period, what I did learn was that to be very careful for what I asked for.
And specific.
It's specific, and the universe has a sense of humor. And if you're not being honest with yourself, then you're going to get exactly what you asked for. Sometimes what you asked for is not what you needed. So at some point I was like, okay, I have a lot of humble learning to do with this. You know, it's like a kid with a little jetpack, you know, it's like just exploding all over the place and going, okay, so like with that comes a responsibility to yourself, to the people around you, to your purpose, to all of these things. So take it down a notch and sit quietly and like, what is it that you know, what do you want? Who are you to be, you know?
Sometimes it's a hard question to answer though. Like, what do you want? No, really, what do you want?
Absolutely. Actually, recently, I've been going through like this, you know, this up and down bumpy ride with these questions, particularly with the album. And I found that everything worked when I didn't ask what I wanted. I found that the moment I started to think, oh, what needs to be in this? And, you know, I think half the album I wrote within a week and a half. and I have no real memory of it. And so it happened in a really, really, really transitional period. Like this year has been so much change that's been good and bad, a lot of darkness, a lot of transition. And I actually, during this period, lost the closest family member that I have to me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And thank you. And he is this light worker. I know he came here to heal, he had this smile that just lit up the world. And he lived truthfully to his calling and to what he felt. But the change that happened in his passing in my family was unbelievable. Our generation started to take ownership of our connections and of being a family, reaching out to each other, seeing if we were okay, things that we would never have done before. Just checking in with you, how are you today? Or, it was his birthday a couple of weeks ago, and we all came together and remembered him and reclaiming what had kind of been taken away being raised by our parents. Like we talked a lot about that, about guilt and communication and running away. And I just spoke with my brother and with my cousins, and we really spoke about it.
That's huge.
And it would never have happened if he hadn't have passed. And I think we all said it. It was like that was his gift to our family. And so it was just such a monumental time of healing, of grieving. But also, I'm very grateful for this period he was sick, and I knew for a while. And then when we knew that he was at that point where he wasn't going to be able to survive, there was about almost a week where we kind of all held vigil for him, and it was 4 days actually. And so there was the understanding that he was going to pass. And then it actually happened parallel to the release of an album of a band that's just been very important musically and spiritually. Like my bandmate, Sebastian Lee Phillip from De Wilde Jagd, we've had this uncanny spiritual connection from the beginning. And in all of the music, in the dialogue, in the books we read, in the ceremonies that we've done, it's kind of like this soul brother that I have. And the album is called Ophio, which is based on the serpent eating its own tail. So my cousin passed that morning off, like 3 a.m, the morning of the album release. And I spoke a lot about him with the people in my life, and we're all still learning from these messages that he's left for us. I have so many of his books. I have right next to me here, I have a piece of paper that I found, which is his 2009 aspirations for the new year. This little note that he had to himself about compassion and love. And, and I have that there, I keep it with me. And I remember during this process, it was the first time I really thought about dying. It's the first time I actually thought about the process of death. And it did somehow get really intertwined into this album. And the transition of leaving the human realm is the biggest surrender, isn't it? It's the biggest surrender that we give to what ties us here in terms of being left or leaving this life. And I remember I started to do these Tibetan death meditations, basically. And I remember one of the introductions, it talked about if you were going to go on a journey, you had no idea when the destination was and when it would come. Wouldn't you start to research into it? There's so much that supports that, the foundation of all fear is death. The unknown is, death is the biggest unknown. And all of our fear and suffering is founded on that fact that we don't know. We can't accept that we don't know. And I remember sitting in the bath, and I got really obsessed with this John Hopkins album, which is called, Psychedelic Therapy? No, Music for Psychedelic Therapy. I think it's the album he released during Corona, and it's an incredible album. Highly, highly recommended. And it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Put in your link as well afterwards. I would sit in the bath and listen to it, and started to go through this process of leaving my body. And I remember in my meditations, sometimes I would have this feeling that if I just let go, I could completely just dissipate into the bigger consciousness. I could dissolve, basically. And it was always a point that I would reach and go, no, you have to go back. And during this period was the first time that I really explored overcoming that fear of letting go completely and what it is to disperse and rejoin. I was reading in this book that was talking about the gift of allowing somebody a peaceful death. And one of my biggest fears was not being able to, he was in New Zealand at the time and I just couldn't get there, was him being away. He lived in London. So he was removed from his spiritual community. He was removed from his safe, energetically safe space that he could, life that he created. And he was there in a hospital, you know, with my family that I didn't know for a very long time. And I was so afraid that he was going to be alone and unable to let go because he felt guilty. He felt like he couldn't leave because my family wasn't ready to let go of him. And it was the first time I thought about any of these things. Like, what is it to give somebody a blessing in death? What is it to honor somebody's life where they're still alive? You know, what is it to die? And I remember Sebastian, my bandmate, saying, he said, you know, like, I know you're going through a lot right now, but you and I both know there's more than this human realm. And you and I have access to more than this human realm. So, you know, remember that on your journey. And of course, you know, like, you know, human grief is undeniable. It's something that's very deep, you know, like we have grief is nothing we can control. But it has been a long process of like actually putting into practice the things that I had read about and thought about and theorized about, saying that, yes, maybe I've looked at this again, maybe I've looked at this a million times before, but this time it has a different light, this time it has a different energy. What is it to say goodbye? What is it to look into the unknown? And you can read a million books, but then, you know, putting it into practice is the other thing, right? I'm really grateful for this experience, you know, when people ask how your year has been. It's been beautiful, it's been incredibly uncomfortable. But it's part of it all, you know, it's part of awakening things that we were afraid to look at. It's part of leaving things by the side of the road that we don't need anymore.
Have you ever felt like you need a little grounding when the full moon hits? Perhaps you want to open your third eye a bit before meditation, get your creative juices flowing for a project, or balance some womb healing? Cosmic Mama ceremonial herbal teas for the chakras can help. Our 100% organic, sustainably sourced, and caffeine-free blends are meticulously handcrafted in small batches. Whether you're looking for an herbal infusion to complement an intentional moment or ceremony, or you just want to enjoy a soothing and delicious brew, Cosmic Mama is here for you. You can support our podcast and enjoy 15% off with code WHISPERS15 on cosmicmama.co. Indulge in the magic of Cosmic Mama ceremonial herbal teas and let their harmonizing essence guide you on your path of connection and well-being.
The moon. The moon hung hot and ripe over the sun, and all the women of the earth, they rose to their feet to dance, for love and for lust, for yearning and nurture. Not to trample on their fathers, their forefathers, the brothers and uncles of the land, but to feel their wombs quake with the moon. For the snake that slithered from the tree to whisper in her ear. For hips and bellies that swelled with the wolf's howl. For voices that began sweet and innocent and ended with a growl. And the moon hung hot and ripe over the sun. And the women they danced, feet stamped, toes curled into the ground.
I think death is one of those things where your narrative can also be changed. Of course, like you were talking about, no matter what happens, there's going to be the grieving, and that's going to be difficult. For me, at least, I think that you're just moving on to the next job or the next soul path. Of course, the whole process is anxiety-inducing, and it's not pleasant. My dad died last year, and that was my first. It's actually fine. It's my first experience with death with someone close to me. Of course, the process was awful. Awful. So my mom is a medium, and she's able to communicate with spirits, and she's had that since she was a child. It runs in my family. And so he visits her all the time. And so it gave me like a really deep sense of comfort. Thankfully, she can communicate with him, and he's thriving. He wasn't thriving anymore in this life. That was the hard part, was seeing him just unhappy, like so unhappy. Watching someone's health go down. Okay, he's almost better off transitioning at that point of his life.
Absolutely.
And I did go through therapy to help change my perspective on death. So I see it in a different way. I learned to grieve. I never knew how to grieve.
Can you?
Yeah, right. Until it happens, right?
There's no handbook on that. I would say to my partner, I'd be like, I'm okay now. I don't know when I am going to fully be okay. I'm sure there will be a part where I will be, but I'm not going to be able to predict when.
You can't with grieving.
You can't. It would be like in a patch of sunlight would hit something somehow, and then suddenly I would be crying. There's no handbook on it.
And it's different for everyone. It's different for every situation. But I feel like in this instance, I grieved really hard for a shorter amount of time. Now I feel at peace. You know, I think about him often, but I just know that he's thriving, and I get updates from my mom. And that part is actually quite beautiful, that I'm really happy that she has those superpowers to be able to send the messages of, hey, he's fine.
Yeah.
He looks the same, but he's like in his 40s, I think. He's a scientist. He's literally continuing his work in the next dimension. So he's still working the same thing. He didn't finish his work here. And now he's like, okay, you know what? I'm left this body, and now I'm going to continue it over here. Have you seen your cousin? Has he come to visit?
I haven't seen him in his form. I mean, that was the big goodbye. I think that how I feel is that he will never exist as him anymore.
Oh, maybe he's just done.
I often said to people, it's like he was ready. He got an early pass. He got the early out. He also had trouble being human, you know. It's like, you know what? You're good. You're ready. You know, you're ready for the next one. I mean, he was only 50, not even 50, and it's young. And they were like, oh, how can it happen? But he lived a life that was so incredibly beautiful and so truthful, more than most people do in 80, 90 years of their life.
Well, that must have been his soul path, because that's what he chose.
Exactly.
And because he was already so ascended in that current life.
Exactly.
And like you said, his purpose was to get your family together. And he's like, you know what, it's time. And he's like, peace out, guys. Exactly. He's like, I'm not coming back to be human.
Absolutely not.
This is too complicated.
It's too complicated. It's too complicated. It's not that he needs a different form and a different language now, you know. And I remember distinctly the moment when he passed, and my partner and I were here, and we'd stayed up somehow, and it was 3 a.m, and I remember I got the message from my other cousin, and we both stood up, and we looked at each other, we smiled, and we hugged, and then at the same time we felt this huge rush of energy pass through both of us and went, you know, he came and said goodbye. We both felt it and spoke about it later. I went to Greece for a holiday a few months later, and I kind of allowed myself that period to like really grieve. Like I didn't have any other distractions, and I would feel him. We spent a lot of time in the ocean. There was something in the way the light played on the water, and I always felt him there.
Oh, that's so beautiful, especially with the god and goddess energy of Greece.
Exactly. I mean, we went there with exactly that reason. I was like, we're going to the temple of Demeter, and then we're going to see Dionysus, and we're going to
channel the Greek gods and goddesses.
Absolutely, back when they were fierce. And it's funny, I was kind of nervous to do this podcast. I was like, what am I going to talk about?
What are we not going to talk about now?
Exactly.
Because this has been out of my comfort zone, I try to not script too much, but I want to give some subjects for inspiration. This is really a practice for me, get out of my own head.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're talking about improvisation and just going in it and be like, you know what, let's just be us.
Exactly.
And use it as a platform as almost practicing channeling as well. What do people want to hear? What is going to be healing for us and for the
Right.
collective? And that's the whole point. And to learn from other people as well.
Yes.
Jumping into the unknown.
Jumping into the unknown. Exactly.
And lots of beautiful things come up from that. I feel like I've been such a planner for a lot of my life up until the past few years. And I really have the best experiences without planning.
Get out of your own way.
Of course, you have to do some planning in the 3D world to function. But if I don't have to plan, I won't do it too rigidly.
Mm-hmm. If you feel like you're forcing something, I mean, this is something I've learned, like when writing something, for example, if I'm just like trying to get a track to work, that's when you just leave it. It's when you just step back.
Take a break.
Or if I feel like if I feel like I'm not getting responses for like the 6 emails that I've sent out, or if I feel like, I don't know, like something's not working, I'm like, okay, there is something here that you need to step back and readdress in your energy. Because I feel like when I'm vibrating in a way of abundance, in a way of giving, there are no obstacles. Everything just flows, Or I don't know if it's because you don't see anything as an obstacle because you just go around it, or if they aren't there, who knows? But anyway, I don't see them and everything is fine. But then there are days when, it's just like, it just feels like one after another, just kind of popping up everywhere. And you're like, why is this so difficult? And the universe is like, hello, I'm giving you signs here. You need to stop. It's not do it harder, it's do it differently.
Well said. Really well said. What do you do in situations where you have a block in creativity and you have a deadline? Because that for me, I think is tricky. Because how do you force creativity? And you're like, oh, shoot, I need this done by next week.
So what I do is I do the pre-planning where I give myself a huge buffer for days like that. So they say to me, can you get it done in this time? And I say, actually, I need this time. And then I also allow a huge buffer for post-production as well, because I know that post-production is really important for it being at a professional level, but also it being at its best potential. And I don't like other people's deadlines messing with the potential of what something could be. So I do have that planning part of me where I go, all right. The fact is, it is possible to write a lot within a short period of time, but I can't predict that.
Can't predict inspiration. I'm going to be inspired on March 15th for a week and a half.
Yeah. It's not going to happen. I mean, sometimes I need to write something, but somehow there is another track that's sitting inside me that needs to come out. So then I have to spend some time to write this track that I'll record and then just put aside and then get started on the next project. And for some reason, it was important to do that first. Or there will be times where, there will be something that could work on for days and I feel like it's just going nowhere, and understanding to just kind of move your focus somewhere. Sometimes there will be a point where, because there are also like other technical tasks that I can take care of during a period. So it's like, okay, nothing's happening here right now creatively. So I'm going to stop that and I'm going to go and organize my files, because that needs to be done anyway. Because when I'm working, I'm completely disorganized and everything is a mess and there's cables everywhere and there's like 60 different things on my desktop and all badly named and, it's a mess. So maybe this is the time to go and do some housekeeping, or, this is time to research that new plugin or that new software that I have. So it's like, use this time to skill up. So when the message comes, you have the tools, I do have some, like the pre-planning that allows me for those days that, you just wake up and you go, I'm just not feeling good in myself. So it's not going to be a very nice message today. Or, it's like sometimes I'll stop something and go read a book, because maybe what I needed was, there was this last piece and it was hidden in that book. Or I need to go for a walk, or I need to go meet up with a friend and have a certain conversation that is that last piece of the puzzle, and trusting that if you're a channel, then messages come from everywhere. And what we were talking about before, this thing of keeping the channel clean, keeping visiting old wounds, this part of general spiritual housekeeping, this can happen in so many different ways. One of the most interesting experiences I had was just after Corona, and I do like to take trips by myself to places like deserts or volcanoes, things like that. And so I booked a trip for a week by myself to Canary Islands, and I had gone through a period where I had been hurt, so I decided that I was going to protect myself quite hard from ever being hurt again. I was like, you know what, it's you and me, we're going to do this by ourselves, and I'm going to make myself bulletproof. Really, really great thing to do. And so what I did was I closed myself off so hard that I couldn't feel anything. People who've been hurt do that. I came to the understanding that in order for me to move on in any part of my life, I needed to find a way to access. So I spent a week going into the desert, and I would go in with my little altar, and I would a little bit of food, and I would wait for a place which would call to me, and I would sit down and I would give the earth an offering, and I would set everything down, and I would start to meditate. And I spent every day doing that. And I went, I would go through my process of activating each chakra and, grounding myself in the earth, feeling this energy that was coming through. But at my heart, I spent hours there, and I would go through and I would find parts that hurt, and I would massage it, I would talk to it, I would sing to it, I would just allow it to be touched, because I'd closed it off from everybody, including myself. And this process of allowing it to open, and it was like this feeling of like, when like something's so hard, it has to break, like it has to, and it was like, oh, okay, all right, allow it, and like allow it to crack open, and allow these parts to open and open, to a point where I remember one day, one afternoon, walking around, and I could feel this stream from my chest just flowing into the world, like huge. It wasn't even a trickle, it was just this huge stream coming out from the center of my chest to the rest of the world. And it was happening after I'd stopped meditating, and I was just walking around this desert, allowing this broadcast. And so I have a fascination with bones. I have a connection with bones, and it's funny because I am vegan, so I mean, it's not fascination with death, but it's something, there's like an old witch that really connects with bones, and they became my totems, in that I would go and have these periods of asking to be healed, or asking for messages, and somehow I would have this gift at the end that I was never expecting it, that would be a bone of some kind. It would be like a vertebrae, or it would be this thing, and I started to collect some. And at some point I would start to give them away to very special people. I would talk to them about the experience and bring it through, and they'd be like, okay, this is for you now, I mean, the same thing happened when we were in Greece. Like, my partner had never really had any of these experiences before. And I talked to him about this. It's in many cultures, this thing of offering, making an offering.
Yeah, there's bone magic.
Exactly.
I'm not familiar with it. I'm very intrigued, but there is a lot of bone magic in witchcraft or around the world.
Exactly. And the first step is to give. It always starts with making an offering and gratitude. And, we were by the ocean, we just finished lunch, and I said, well, go and try it. I'm not going to watch you. Go. And he went for a long walk and did his thing, and he did his thing, and I did my thing. And then after that, he came back and he was like, oh, that felt really nice. I was like, that's good. And then we kept walking, and he said, it was very cute. He was like, well, I would like to find some bones also. And I said, it was super sweet, actually.
That is.
He's this beautiful, beautiful purity that I love about him, that, he just so open. And then we were talking, and then at some point I said to him, I would really like to go to the Temple of Demeter tomorrow. I feel like I would like to go make an offering there. And he was like, okay. And then he stopped, and he was like, and there in front of us were two complete bone structures of two goats who had, it was like they'd laid down together and passed away. And it was just right there in front of us. And I was like, well, babe, there's your message. And we're definitely going to this temple tomorrow making an offering.
I admire how much you're tuned in to your intuition and just the synchronicity that shows up in your life. It's like spiritual life goals. Yeah. But you can only get there if you live in flow. That's the challenge.
Absolutely. It is a challenge. But in the end, it's the one connection that I have that hasn't failed me, or that I trust. I'm learning to work my cynicism with human beings and my trust. I have a beautiful family around me that I don't take for granted. The two closest people to me right now have this purity, childlike purity of love that is what somebody who's as spiritually old and cynical as I am, I need them. I need their light. I spent so much time in shadow and they're my light. And I have just as much to learn from them. They're teaching me to be human. They're teaching me to be present. I don't believe either of them are completely human, but their lives here at the moment, their incarnations here are teaching me to be human.
So I actually wanted to ask about your album.
My new album is called Socha. And Socha I got from this amazing book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And this man, John Koenig, has just made up words for these feelings that we have, but there are no words to describe it. And so Socha talks about what we feel when we see the hidden vulnerabilities in others. And this album is, I feel, a space. I feel like on the stage or in an album, we create a space, a safe space, or invite people into a space. And this one is where I invite people to be vulnerable. That's the album that is, I'm learning to be patient, but I finished it. It's gone off to the label, and now it's out of my hands, actually, when it will be mastered and released. The label is called A Strangely Isolated Place. Actually, even coming into contact with that label was a whole story in synchronicity in itself, where I just kind of went, I don't think they'll take me, but I'm just going to send off this email anyway. And I kind of, covered my eyes and hit. I think I even wrote the most ridiculous message that was just very something that I would say off the cuff. And I went, you know what, I'm just going to send it. And he wrote back and I was like, my reply was, oh, wow, you're a human being. And he said, yes, I am, with all my flaws. And it was just kind of went from there, like in the name of it in itself, that their ethos is, and all of the musicians, the composers and the producers on this album, on this label, are phenomenal. And they've all created their own little vessels of quiet, reflective, alone but not alone time. You
don't know when it's going to come out because they have to spend the time to do the post-production.
Exactly, to press and print it, but I am pushing for a winter release because it needs to be in this period. It's not a summer album. This is not something people listen to at their barbecues in the park.
This is when you're home
in the
because
darkness.
It's too cold outside.
In the darkness.
For people out there living in Europe or Northern Europe in the winters is an adjustment.
It's definitely this Berlin Depression vampire period. It's definitely something.
Coming from California, we have a lot of sun, so it was really depressing when you don't have vitamin D for months. And Paris is quite gray. We don't have too much sunlight, but I've come to the point where I actually appreciate it now, and I'm like, oh, it's the winter. I'm going to go hibernate and be alone. And I love being alone, maybe a little too much, but I'm like, oh yes, now I really have a reason to be alone.
Totally. I mean, hibernation is wonderful. If I really literally could hibernate, I would. I'm just like, oh, like winter sleep.
Yeah,
yes.
I love it. Sometimes I dream about moving to the woods and becoming a hermit, but I think it's not super healthy for the human experience. So I'm going to not do that right now.
Not right now. I mean, I still do dream about it. I dream about a place by the lake with mountains and incredible trees, but I feel like, our work is still here. You could podcast you could totally, what you should do is you should have a place where we, guests can come.
That is my dream.
Well, there we go.
I'm putting that out there.
Absolutely. I would definitely come.
Well, my dream is to have a country house where I can build out a studio,
Amazing.
for my podcasting or playing music or whatever, and I can have people come through and just, even if it's not for podcasting, just come visit and get inspiration, whether you're writing, whether you're producing music, whatever it is that you do. That would be the ultimate dream.
Absolutely. More safe spaces for highly sensitive people.
Exactly, because the highly sensitive people can hide out in this forest.
We need these safe houses.
It is a safe house. It's a safe house from human energy.
Should start a whole network for highly sensitive people. It's like, are you in Paris feeling overwhelmed? This place is a safe space for you. It's just like an app.
Yes, I've checked out the energy. No, really.
Totally. Oh, yes, because you can go check. That's right. I loved this part of your podcast.
Yes, and because I haven't found that place in France yet in nature where I feel safe. I went to Normandy and it was just awful, to be honest. So I need to find that place where I feel safe in nature, where I have the spirits of the forest. Normandy was the spirits of soldiers in war.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of energy there that's, no.
They need to ascend or be cleared. And I'm like, yeah, we're definitely not having a country house here. So I'm still trying to figure out where that place is. But at some point, it would be a nice hub for creatives. I really, really want to thank you for trusting the energetic resonance and coming to speak with me. I've learned so much from you.
Thank you, likewise. Thank you for opening this experience.
I wish you the best for your album. I can't wait for it to come out.
I will let you know.
I will be playing some of your tracks as well after we close.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for having this platform, being so brave and trusting that, I mean, this is a safe house here that you've created. So thank you for doing that.
I will see you in the ethers then.
Exactly. Happy travels.
Thanks. All right. See you.
Bye.
Thank you for being a part of our community. Be sure to connect with me by hitting subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. I greatly appreciate your support and would be thrilled if you could leave a review. Your reviews help this podcast reach a wider audience and foster stronger collective connection. You can also connect with me on Instagram and YouTube at The Cosmic Whispers Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the interview with LIHLA. You can get in touch with LIHLA on Instagram at LIHLA Lee, on Facebook at lihla.music, SoundCloud at Lee Chun, or her website www.leechun.com, which is linked in the show notes. See you next week.